please call the roll.
Commissioner Platt? Oh, I think we got the baby too.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
You got 2 for 1.
Commissioner Gonzalez?
Rodriguez?
Yeah, that one. Oh my goodness.
Yes, I'm here.
I got shook up by the baby. My sincere apologies.
No worries.
Commissioner Stoudemire Wesley?
Present.
Commissioner Myers?
Here.
Chair Cruz?
Here, thank you. All right, I have a brief notice to read. As required by state law, Prosper Portland has provided an opportunity for the public to access and attend this virtual meeting. There is YouTube live stream video of the meeting, and the public has had the opportunity to arrange in advance to provide virtual testimony. At this time, the public may also provide written testimony to the commission by emailing prospercommissioners@prosperportland.us. Again, prospercommissioners@prosperportland.us. All right, commissioner reports. Does anybody have anything to report?
No.
Nope. Nope. Quiet today. Okay. Next then would be the executive director report from Kimberly Branham.
Good afternoon, Chair Cruz and Commissioners. It's a very good day. Can you hear me okay? Barely. All right. Do I need to be, feels awfully close. Okay. Better? All right. It's a great day to be here in Old Town, where just a few blocks away, we are witnessing history, or there is history being made, as the Portland Dragathon, which is hosted at Darcel's nightclub in partnership with Portland fashion company Wildfang, is raising funds for the Trevor Project. We all know that it provides support for young people in LGBTQIA plus communities, and the Guinness World Record is probably being set as we meet for the longest drag artist show in the world, in the history of these things. And so just want to note that Prosper Portland's Office of Events and Film is hosting a surprise event. I'm sorry, a surprise every Wednesday pop-up event. It's kind of a long title. Just at 13 Northwest 4th, across the street from the Hoxton, from 4 to 6 p.m. today. So board members hopefully will be able to get out by 5 and go join. But for everyone else, there's an opportunity to celebrate the end of Dragathon. If you're in the neighborhood, it's a family-friendly event with tunes and performers for all ages. There'll be lemonade and refreshments. So looking forward to celebrating this historic event. I want to acknowledge Amanda Park and Michelle Comer for leading all of the Every Wednesday events. There are events that are happening throughout the summer, both at Directors Park and by Big Pink, and across the city, and you can find out more at everywednesday.com. If you can't make it today, of course, this coming weekend of July 15th and 16th marks the annual Portland Pride Waterfront Festival, which is one of the largest donation-based Pride events on the West Coast. We encourage everyone to come downtown this weekend, and you can find out more at portlandpride.org for more information. In addition to the ongoing Every Wednesday events and the Pride Festival this weekend, there are events, as we know, happening throughout the summer. We encourage everyone to go to travelportland.com/events or Venture Portland to check out all of the events that are happening this weekend. For example, in addition to Pride, we have the Mississippi Street Fair, the Cathedral Park Jazz Fest, so lots going on in the city, and a lot of the events that you'll see that are community-led have been supported through Prosper Portland's events office. In addition, I just want to highlight 2 other highlights in the past month. So on Thursday, June 29th, I was pleased to speak at the at the groundbreaking of the Fairfield in Southwest Portland. So not only will the Fairfield provide critically needed quality affordable housing for people who are at risk of or who will have recently experienced houselessness, it'll also provide economic opportunities to local businesses in the thriving West End district. As you might recall, Prosper Portland's involvement in the Fairfield spanned more than a decade. In 2010, we historically have owned the Fairfield, and then we transferred the Fairfield to the Portland Housing Bureau in 2010, and we now have been partnering with Home Forward, who is going to be operating and owning the Fairfield, and we've been working with them in terms of operating the commercial space. So our investment comes from both tax increment finance as well as ARPA funds. And we're really pleased to be able to honor the community's desire to maintain a retail space at that, in that part of our city. So really want to appreciate Lisa and Kay and David and Bernie, who worked hard to work through a very complicated financial stack and make that a possibility. And this past Friday, July 7th, I was part of, along with the commissioner, part of a delegation that welcomed U.S. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg for his visit to Southeast 82nd. We were really excited to host him at the PCC campus in the heart of the Jade District, which was noted. And of course, we have a long-term partnership with the Jade District through the Neighborhood Prosperity Initiative. And it was really marking the fact that the state, the city, and the federal government have earmarked significant resources to 82nd to make it a safer corridor and to consider what it means to deliver on the community priorities of a more inclusive neighborhood that is able to prosper in place. So it was really exciting to see attention being paid. And there were a lot of conversations around this not being the only orphan highway in Portland, let alone in the country. And so looking at this as a model and really needing to invest in these sorts of areas. So it was great to be able to participate in that. Finally, I want to mention that Prosper Portland will be hosting a live informational session via Zoom regarding the new grant program for small businesses, the Small Business Restore Grant. We've talked a little bit about that. You'll recall that this program is funded through American Rescue Plan Act resources, and it provides one-time direct grants to support Portland small businesses that are experiencing hardships as a result of the pandemic. It's intended to help stabilize small businesses with up to $25,000 in financial assistance, and it is available over the next few months, and we're doing it sort of as a rolling program. So right now we're anticipating that there will be up to 5 opportunities for businesses to submit applications. This session prepares businesses for the second round of the grant process. So the information session is set for July 17th at 3 p.m. The grant application, the second round, will open on Tuesday, August 1st, close Friday, August 11th, and recipients will be notified on Friday, August 25th. Really want to appreciate Ellen and Laz and Amy and the entire Restore grant team for their work on these important resources. All right, now it is my pleasure, my favorite part of the board meetings, to introduce 2 new colleagues. One returning colleague, and a colleague who's taking on a new job. So I'm going to start with one of our 2 new colleagues, Sarah King, who is with us, who's joined Prosper Portland as the new Old Town project manager. She has a cool Instagram account that you should follow that celebrates how wonderful Old Town is. But she comes to the agency with a background in small business ownership and advocacy. She most recently worked for Venture Portland, where we had an opportunity to collaborate with her as the district manager in Gateway, doing small business and community development work. Sarah has also been a business owner for more than 6 years and really understands firsthand the unique challenges that come with running a business in Portland. Sarah spent her childhood in rural Oregon and raised her daughter with her husband here in Portland. In her free time, she's a singer and she performs regularly around Portland, multi-talented. She throws big dinner parties, tends to her garden, and lives with her terrible cat, Little Lady. So we are delighted to have Sarah on the team. All right, Akil Patterson. I'd like to introduce Akil next. Also thrilled to have Akil here. Akil is Prosper Portland's new Social Equity and Educational Development, or SEED, grant program manager. So as you might recall, as the City Council has identified alignment of services, they transition management of the city's cannabis business tax programs, in particular the SEED grant program, from the Office of Civic Life to Prosper Portland, and they moved the regulatory and enforcement portions to the Bureau of Development Services. So we're really excited to have the equity-centric programmatic funds at Prosper Portland to support the SEED grant program and Reimagine Oregon. And we are thrilled to have Akil. He led the SEED grant program at Civic Life, so he has a lot of experience in that and deep experience in Baltimore and New York on programs that support political organizing, community advocacy, a whole host of experiences on programmatic development. He holds degrees from Purdue University, University of Maryland, and continues to volunteer his time to support youth in accessing higher education opportunities. So welcome. Thrilled to have you. All right, next I'd like to reintroduce a familiar face to some of you and a new face to others. So pleased to announce that Allison Schweiger has rejoined Prosper Portland as policy analyst on the Equity, Governance, and Communications team. She's going to be engaging with Justin and the board process and Pam, so you'll see Allison frequently. She's no stranger to Prosper Portland, as I mentioned, having worked here from 2007 to 2018, where she worked on a variety of policies and initiatives from the establishment of the Portland Economic Investment Corporation to policies like the Business and Workforce Equity Policy. In 2018, she and her family moved to Atlanta, where she worked as Neighborhood Revitalization Manager in Invest Atlanta. Fun fact about Invest Atlanta, it was a visit to Atlanta where we actually started thinking about what it might mean to change our name eventually. Invest Atlanta is the equivalent of Prosper Portland in the city of Atlanta. So the Economic Development Authority and Redevelopment Authority there. Allison graduated with her bachelor's from University of Portland and completed postgraduate work in public administration at Portland State University. In her spare time, Allison can be found keeping up with her adorable daughter, planning trips with her husband, and enjoys most things that are not cooking. So kindred spirit, yeah. All right, and definitely everybody knows Yvonne Smoker, but just want to acknowledge that Yvonne has accepted a new role as the Business Advancement Team lead on our work to support traded sector food and beverage manufacturing and tech industries. So this is a direct result of the adoption of Advance Portland, and so we're excited to have Yvonne work in this capacity. She's been with Prosper Portland, as you might recall, from 2017. She's worked on the Entrepreneurship and Community Economic Development team most recently and the Business Advancement team in various capacities. So, you know, she's been engaged in Mercatus, Portland Means Progress, the Inclusive Business Resource Network most recently. And what we know and love about Yvonne is that she is connected and deeply ingrained in the work of supporting small businesses and small business opportunities. And so everybody already knows her and loves her. And so we know that she will thrive in this new role. So congratulations and thanks.
Great, thank you. That always is the best part of our meetings. So congratulations to all of you, and welcome to Sarah and Nikhil. Super happy to have you, and congratulations to Yvonne and Allison. So really glad you're all with us. So thank you. Okay, let's see, meeting minutes. Would somebody like to make a motion to approve the June 21st, 2023 minutes?
So moved.
Thank you. Do you have a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that is a special approval. I like it. All right, so do we have any public comment?
On the game today.
No, okay. All right, well, as I mentioned earlier, if there are people out there who want to make public comments, you can provide comment to the commission by emailing prospercommissioners@prosperportland.us. Okay, so next up, we have the consent agenda. And for folks that have seen the agenda in its original format, you should know that we had items 6, 7, and 8, 7, 8, and 9 on the consent agenda, but we're going to pull 9 from the consent agenda and talk about it a little bit in our regular portion. So, so right now, I'd just like to accept a motion to approve the resolutions that accompany 6, 7, and 8. That would be resolution 7492, 7493, 7494, and 7495.
Chair Cruz, also item 10 is staying on the consent agenda.
Oh, okay, all right. And 7497. Thank you. Okay. Somebody like to make a motion?
I'd move to accept.
Great,
Second.
thank you. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimously, thank you. Okay, so picking up then with item 9, this is an action item authorizing an amendment to the guaranteed maximum price agreement with Northwest Demolition and Dismantling, Inc. for abatement of the former for abatement of the former United States Postal Service Processing and Distribution Center at 715 Northwest Hoyt. And Wendy Wilcox, hi Wendy, will present on this. Thank you.
Hello? Yeah, there it is. So, good afternoon, Chair Cruz, Commissioners, and Executive Director Branham. Thank you for having me here today. I am here to give you some context on the change to the current resolution. Staff has been urgently assessing the cost impacts of the friable asbestos-containing soil that was discovered during a soil inspection during the demolition of the USPS facility, as well as negotiating other potential cost savings elsewhere in the project. The resolution provided was based on our best estimate available earlier this week. Over the course of continued negotiations, we believe it is prudent to increase the requested rise in contingency from $2 million to $2.6 million in order to ensure there is no disruption in the work underway. Our current best estimate is coming in higher than initially anticipated due to ongoing negotiations and a higher level of effort required. We continue to expect and pursue savings in the overall GMP at this time. And if there's any questions?
Questions? Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Then would someone like to make a motion to approve, this would be item 9, resolution number 7496 as amended?
I make a motion to approve item 9.
Second.
Thank you. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you. Okay. Thanks very much. Okay, so our next item, this is an information item. It's an update on tax increment exploration processes. And Shay Flaherty-Bettine and Tony Barnes will present on this. Welcome, gentlemen.
All right. Good afternoon, Chair Cruz, Commissioners, Director Branham. For the record, my name is Shay Flaherty-Bettine. I use pronouns like he and him, and I serve as a director for the Economic Development Department. Today, I'm joined by my colleague, Tony Barnes, our finance manager, and we both appreciate the opportunity to speak with you this afternoon about exploring the creation of a potential new tax increment finance district, both in East Portland and in the Central City. And this follows a presentation to City Council seeking their direction on the TIF exploration process as well. I'll also note I'm here today as a stand-in for my incredible colleague Lisa Abwoff, and I want to thank her for her leadership, as well as the team of project managers who would lead this work, Dr. Catherine Hardinger, Dana Decline, and Roger Gonzalez. If we go to the next slide, please. All right, so this afternoon, we're going to be walking through a presentation, and we're seeking your direction. First, we're going to touch on some strategic and technical context and background for the work. We're going to discuss TIF exploration parameters given this context and the proposed process in greater detail. And finally, we're going to close with a timeline of next steps, which include multiple touch points with the board and council, multiple forms of community engagement, and coming back to you all with a more formal update and or actions in fall of 2024. That should also leave us with plenty of time for discussion or questions. If we go to the next slide. So as I mentioned, we'd like to ground today's presentation in a little bit of context and background focused on how this exploration process furthers broader policy direction and responds to immediate and real community needs. I want to do this while also digging into some of the key financial and statutory considerations. Next slide, please. So you'll recall that in April, City Council adopted Advance Portland, a call to action for inclusive economic growth. And one of the 4 key objectives in that plan is to foster a vibrant central city and neighborhood commercial districts with tailored strategies that create vital centers of employment, small business, entertainment, and cultural amenities. The plan directs us to pursue TIF as a tool for inclusive growth and stabilization within the central city and in alignment with community-led TIF exploration in East Portland. It also directs us to return to City Council within 90 days of Advance Portland's approval, which happened back in April, to launch a TIF district exploration process with early priority for both East Portland, including 82nd Avenue, and a subsequent focus on the central city. So we're here today to launch that exploration process. Next slide. So the city's current policy sets aside 45% of TIF revenues for affordable housing investments. TIF and the set-aside policies are critical tools for the city's delivery of affordable housing, and since 2000, TIF has funded approximately 8,500 affordable units across Portland, the vast majority of which are affordable to households earning 60% of the area median income or below. It's also important to note that the non-set-aside TIF funds are critical for developing middle-income and workforce housing projects like the Nick Fish or the Lentz Town Center. And while nearly 75% of the multifamily units produced in 2021 were added in the Central City, Gateway, and Northwest neighborhoods, PHB's State of Housing report shows that there are currently no neighborhoods in Portland where an extremely low-income, Black, or single-mother household could affordably rent a 2-bedroom unit. There are no neighborhoods in Portland where low-income Black, Latina, Native American, senior, single-mother, or foreign-born households could afford to purchase a home. And any low-income household could choose from about half of the city's neighborhoods, and they are all of those are located outside the central city and closer in neighborhoods. So if we go to the next slide. So why East Portland? Communities of color continue to increase in our East Portland neighborhoods, where the current neighborhood composition in 2020 was ranging between 40 to 48% BIPOC by some counts. Increases in home prices and rents in many East Portland neighborhoods over the last 5 years may be signaling a growing risk of displacement and housing instability. In 2020, every census tract east of 82nd Avenue was considered at risk of displacement. And this is where we know a growing portion of the Black, Indigenous, and all persons of color in Portland are currently residing. And on the commercial side, we know the pandemic brought a rapid increase in new small business formation and in new home-based businesses. And while some areas have seen decreased demand for retail space, due in part, we think, to safety and livability issues. So we go to the next slide. So the central city, I think some of this can go without saying, but it's important to dive in. COVID-19 and the shift to hybrid work have had, we know, a strong impact in our central city, particularly in areas with an imbalanced mix of uses. We're seeing vacancy rates increase as key employers are downsizing or moving out of downtown due to safety and livability concerns, tax considerations, even parking costs, and employee needs. And we know that without intervention, numerous areas will continue to experience persistent vacancy, livability challenges, default risk, and a loss in value and vibrancy. At the same time, we have rehabilitation and major development opportunities that would unlock housing production and could support our economic competitiveness and climate priorities if key infrastructure needs were addressed. I think with that, I'm passing it to you, Tony.
Great. Thanks, Shay. Next slide, please. As a reminder, when a new TIF district is created, a geographic boundary for investment and maximum amount that can be borrowed over the life of the district or maximum indebtedness are established. This slide shows the existing maximum indebtedness for each district, each current district. In blue, you'll see what the total debt each district has issued to date, as of today. As you can see, most of the districts have issued the maximum amount of debt, with the exception of the Cully district, which will start issuing debt this fiscal year, as well as Gateway, North Macadam, and then some final amounts in the Interstate Corridor and Lentz Town Center, which will be issued over the next year or two. Next slide, please. On this slide, what we're showing is a map of the Portland TIF districts that are located with the status of total resources available and the spend down to resources. So the prior slide showed new debt issue, what's left out of the remaining debt issued for each TIF district. This slide shows really what's remaining in those resources that have been issued over the last few years and over the next few years that are coming in the forecast. The gray districts are identified as complete districts where all TIF resources have been spent and the plan's priorities have been completed. The blue are districts that have defined priorities and TIF resources that are fully committed, but primarily through action plans. The timeline for the spend down of these TIF resources can be over the next year, 2 years, maybe as many as 5 years. The green districts have just opened, such as the Cully district, or have significant amount of resources left. That includes Cully, Gateway, North Mac, and as I mentioned, they'll be over the next 5 years, maybe even longer, past the 5-year forecast for the spend down of resources. Next slide, please. This slide illustrates the timeline of when taxes that are used to repay the debt will be no longer needed and can go back to the city of Portland, Multnomah County, and other overlapping taxing jurisdictions. So we're at a really transitional stage right now where the debt is being paid off in many districts, and districts that have been created 30 years ago are being closed out and finalized. Tying back to the prior slide, there's complete districts, districts that are defined priorities and fully committed, or refining priorities and resources that are still available. Some of these districts have already returned taxes and no longer are collecting taxes to pay off debt. However, there are some resources still in Central East Side, Lentz Town Center, and the Interstate Corridor, which will be spent over the next 3, 4, 5, and so many years over the 5-year forecast. However, the taxes will no longer be needed to be collected from those districts because the debt's going to be paid off, and therefore those districts can be potentially amended to return the acreage and assessed value back to the overlapping taxing jurisdictions, and therefore release the related acreage and assessed value. Next slide, please. So given what we've just seen, this final slide on the numbers here is where the city could be by July of 2024 if those districts have fully repaid their debt and some of the districts have been amended to release acreage and value. That would leave some districts that need to continue collecting taxes at 3% of the city's maximum of 15% of acreage and assessed value. And then there would be about 2,700 acres left, available, and 2 billion, that translates to 2,729 acres left that's needed to be for collecting taxes for those remaining districts like Gateway, Cully, and North Macadam, and $2 billion in assessed value related to those districts. That frees up 11,186 acres that could be invested in new TIF districts, and also $9.8 billion of value under the city's 15% limit, citywide limit. So that what could be available based on what districts are closing out and making some amendments to some of the districts that need to continue spending resources but no longer need to collect taxes. And with that, I think I'm handing it back to Shay.
If we go to the next slide. All right, so I think we're just going to share a high-level overview and some details regarding the process that's also outlined in the resolution before you. So if we go to the next slide. So you'll all recall, City Council back in November adopted the new Cully TIF district, and that was following 4 years of engagement led and co-created with community members and partners. We learned a lot from that process, and many of those lessons learned have and will inform how we do this work moving forward. I just want to highlight a few of those lessons learned. Some of them are on screen, but that includes the importance of community partnership and co-creation, implementation and oversight. We learned to be explicit, to be accountable, and to measure who benefits. We learned about being clear about roles and responsibilities between community and public partners, supporting community leadership while not putting all the work on them or the lead, particularly around technical work involved with the TIF district's creation. We learned that we could and should have brought in our taxing jurisdiction partners earlier in the process, and the importance of deep and broad community engagement, together with the consistency of working group representation, particularly when we were working to develop reports or analysis. And finally, that community development efforts require a layering of financial and policy tools that include but are not exclusive to TIF. If we go to the next slide. So from a high-level perspective, what you see on screen is the framework that we're using to help guide the TIF exploration process based on some of the policies that we've just touched on. Through our work with community partnerships and engagement processes, we're going to center priority communities while balancing priorities with the financial impact to the city budget and other taxing jurisdictions. So as we work with community to review past plans, including Cully, and set potential investment goals, we'll start with a vision of vibrant communities and corridors where current businesses and residents are able to stay and share in the prosperity of the growth that change can bring, where small businesses can grow and there are opportunities for inclusive growth and wealth building. And we hold that these values form the foundation of our work and our proposed approach. If we go to the next slide. So before you today, we're proposing allocations that provide clarity to both community members and to city staff throughout the TIF exploration process for both East Portland and the Central City. And we're talking about specific acreage and assessed value allocations. The proposal includes up to 7,500 acres in East Portland. That's about 2 to 3 of the Lentz Town Center TIF districts, just for a sense of scale, and about $6 billion of assessed value. It also proposes 1,500 acres and almost $3.8 billion of assessed value for the Central City exploration process. We find that these parameters, it's really enabling both the East Portland and the Central City conversations to move forward at the same pace or potentially at different paces if necessary. So we go to the next slide. So on the East Portland exploration process, this is following over a year or so of conversations hosted by EPAP, that's the East PDX Action Plan, and through smaller groups and direct conversations with community partners. The East Portland exploration process builds on what we heard with those Cully lessons learned and acknowledging that East Portland is a large area with multiple communities and different and shared needs. Commissioner Rubio in this proposal would convene a formally designated steering committee body focused on process alignment and exchanges, which will include both community and taxing jurisdiction partners. And then community work would really occur in working groups made up of business district, school district, neighborhood district, and housing partners, together with representatives from the steering committee and interested community members who would be identified through an open call. During early engagement in East Portland, geographic areas will include these working groups, but specifically on the areas shown on this map that generally resonate with what we've been hearing from community. So some of these priorities include ensuring that a broad area of East Portland is represented, particularly east of 205. It includes aligning with active conversations related to 82nd Avenue and its equitable development tied to transportation improvements. It's acknowledging that Park Rose and the Columbia Corridor is a unique area with an increased industrial land and jobs and the blend of those two, and ensuring that some residential land is included within that district boundary. And then building on strong capacity within each of these areas based on community benefit organizations like Rosewood Initiative, J District, Division Midway, those neighborhood prosperity network organizations, and the 82nd Avenue Coalition. And so one of the first tasks of the East Portland TIF Steering Committee would be to confirm that these broad geographies are what these working groups should focus on. So if we go to the next slide. Looking to the Central City, our approach in the Central City aligns more with the objectives and the activities that are outlined in the Advanced Portland Plan, with a focus on those key Central City subdistricts like Downtown and Old Town that have both the opportunity and need for an increased mix of uses, mix of housing production and tools that support the production of both affordable and market rate housing and retaining both our anchor employers and small businesses. We anticipate defining this process over the next few months. And we also acknowledge there's a number of larger sites like OMSI, Lloyd, and Lower Albina, where we know that there will be a need for new streets and new parks together with equitable development, and where TIF could be a tool to support those public, private, and community partnerships. The map highlights a few of those areas in the Central City where TIF could be a useful tool to achieve these goals. And the process will define both boundaries and identify where there are key opportunities for housing production, business retention expansion, and infrastructure and other needs on these large sites. You go to the next slide. Thanks, Justin. So finally, the roadmap that you see before you weaves together several of these paths leading up to a more formal return to council and to this board in fall of '24, specifically in November. We'll continue to update this process map as the work proceeds, but you can see on screen, the green path is tied to our East Portland exploration for TIF, the yellow is tied to the Central City, and purple is the completion of the TIF impact analysis that Echo Northwest has been working on. And so starting from the top, you'll see where we are today with kicking off our exploration of the process. We're looking to launch the East Portland TIF Exploration Committee later this month. And then this fall, we'd be kicking off the East Portland TIF Exploration Working Groups, so those specific geographies. Then this fall, we'd anticipate launching the Central City exploration processes. And then in parallel to these processes, we would look to wrap up the work with Echo Northwest, looking back on past TIF district performance. We anticipate that report coming this fall, and we're aiming for a work session with council late in the calendar year. So I think you see it in winter of '23. And we really anticipate that all these efforts would be running in parallel and all together coalesce in late summer of 2024. So I just want to acknowledge that throughout all of this process, we plan to work with advisory bodies, with OMF and partners regarding the analysis and the potential balancing of the financial impacts to our taxing jurisdictions. Go to the next slide. I think I'll just note, if there is deemed to be support for creating these new districts, we would begin with a legislative process, beginning with the Prosper Board and the Planning Commission to consider any TIF district plans that may result from this exploration process. In any instance, you'd be hearing from us in fall of '24, either as part of that formal process or to provide a status update on where our discussions are at the time. So I think with that, thank you for the opportunity to share today. Happy to take your questions, and I think we also have folks from the team, staff here to answer questions as well.
All right, questions or comments from the commissioners?
A question. Shay, so who determines whether they're viable or not? And how is that determined? Is that the council? Is it us? Is it combination thereof? Is there, I mean, sorry, did I step on a?
No.
It's a great question. I think throughout the process, there are a number of checks and consultations and conversations that happen both across taxing jurisdictions, certainly with you all and with city council. So as you can see from the roadmap, all of those would have to happen for this to move forward.
Just at a technical fine point, so city council ultimately has to approve the creation of any new tax increment finance district, and our jurisdictional partners have what is officially called a consult and confer process. So while Multnomah County doesn't officially take a vote, they are consulted in the process, and their voice really matters because there's an opportunity cost for them. In terms of the financial viability, Tony and, as Shay mentioned, working with the Office of Management and Finance, will do the financial modeling to identify what could be generated, and that will help get to some things like the maximum indebtedness. So it's definitely a team effort. But also, as Shay mentioned at the beginning, there will be a formal sort of process coming to this board to officially kick off the creation. I think once we have maybe a better sense of what those 3 areas might be in East Portland, and then potentially whether we're looking at 1, 2, or 3 districts in the Central City. So we are doing a bit more exploration with community partners, and then we'll come back to sort of officially the second time come back and kick that off.
So I just had a couple of questions. One was, you mentioned in passing that in the Cully example, the taxing jurisdictions may not have been engaged early enough. And I just wondered, so did that result in some pushback from those jurisdictions? And do you anticipate, a similar dynamic in these prospective districts? Or do you think kind of the political/economic wins are maybe a little more positive at this point?
It's a great question, Chair Cruz. I think I'm remembering correctly, back when we were wrapping up the Cully process and we went to speak with our taxing jurisdiction partners, it was also in the middle of the pandemic. So there was a lot of other things happening. So I think while the conversation, there was a little bit of folks being caught off guard, I think the conversations progressed well and led to a successful conclusion. And I think that's the lesson learned. Hopefully, we're looking to avoid any of those dynamics by including them very early in the process, starting with exploration. I think we also know that given the economic climate, we are in desperate need of all the tools that we can get to do this work. So I would anticipate and hope that there's broad support for this type of work.
Great, great. And then my other thought was just with respect to, I know it's really early days, right? We're just talking about getting a process started, so we're not really talking about substance yet. But in terms of, you know, where this might go, how would you see like the use of TIF sort of dovetailing with the needs of the central city to bounce back from, you know, the change in work dynamic, say downtown, and some of the problems that have arisen downtown? Do you, you know, is that kind of part of the agenda then, dealing with those challenges with TIF resources, or is it more a matter of housing and other things? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, for example, would the housing possibility maybe include some funds for conversion of commercial to residential, which seems to be the theme in a lot of cities right now to try to address the change in leasing rates, office leasing rates, for example, and work patterns?
Yeah, I think you're right on track, right? We know that the feasibility of those types of projects are still in question, right? Given the market dynamics, but I do think TIF would be a welcome tool to make any of those pencil and be more viable. We do know that we do need a healthier mix in the downtown core of residential and business, and we saw from our studies with Echo Northwest and Advanced Portland that the areas of the city that fared better throughout the pandemic were the ones that had that healthy mix. So regardless, I think if we're looking at different parts of the central city, you know, you also have different sub-districts that are performing differently depending on the needs. So in Old Town, you might not necessarily require more affordable housing, but a healthier mix of housing types. And in downtown, certainly, we obviously can't use TIF directly to support livability and safety, but having more residents in downtown would provide more eyes on the street and have a more vibrant community and more activity. So I do think it's part of the puzzle.
Great, great, thanks. Yeah, I think that'd be a really good story maybe for us to tell, you know, because there's a lot of angst about that, obviously, right now. Anyway, okay, any other questions or comments? No? No? Okay, well, thanks very much. It was a great presentation.
Real quick.
Oh, yes.
You kind of touched
sorry.
on it, but from the lessons learned, what policy changes have we made, or process changes have we made, you know, in having the conversations on these other districts? I mean, I think you've addressed it, and Chair Cruz asked it in a different way, but you know, I appreciate the good work that you guys have put into this and your teams have put into this, and look forward to actually hearing how this evolves, and look forward for you guys coming back. So,
Great. All right, well, if no further, thank you very much. It was great. Yeah, glad we're moving forward, so.
Thanks.
Okay, so that's the end of our regular agenda. And I have a quick notice, which is there being no further items on the regular agenda, the Prosper Portland Board of Commissioners regular meeting is now adjourned, and we will reconvene in executive session. Okay. So, with the usual protocol, should we give like 5 minutes? Yeah, 5? Sure. Okay. Why don't you read the script? Oh, okay. All right, well, let me, this is actually, yeah, I think we're a little bit off, but yeah, okay. The Prosper Portland Board will now meet in executive session pursuant to Oregon Revised Statutes 192.6602F to consider information or records that are exempt by law from public inspection.